Hello, so what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to go ahead and walk through the guided project Light. That's found on page 113 of your textbook. And basically we're just going to create an app that has a button, and when you press the button, either the app background color will be white or black. So it's kind of simulating what a flashlight would do. So let's go ahead and get started with the app. So let me just go ahead and minimize, and we're going to create a new single view app Xcode project. So I will go ahead and click on next, and I will give it a name, Light. And the one thing you'll want to make sure is that you always specify the language as Swift, user interface as storyboard, and if you want to go ahead and leave these marks unchecked, if you check them, it'll just go ahead and add some additional folders to your application, which are kind of cumbersome when you're first starting out creating apps. So we'll just go ahead, click on next. The next thing we need to do is we need to specify a location. I would advise you to just go ahead and save your apps either to a folder you've created or to the desktop. That way you have easy access to it. The first time you go through and create an app, this might default to a weird place, so you'll want to make sure and change that before you go ahead and create your app. So I will just go ahead and click on the create command. And the app has been created, so I will just go ahead and expand this. If we go ahead and click on the main storyboard and we go into the document outline, you can go ahead and see that we have our one view controller, which I've selected. If you go into the identity inspector, it specifies the class that the view controller is associated with it. So it would be our view controller Swift file. If we go ahead and click on that file, then basically what we have is we have the actual code that controls our view controller, and our view controller is a subclass of our UI view controller. So a lot of the view controllers that you're going to be creating are going to be subclasses of that UI view controller. So let's go back into our main storyboard. The next thing I want to do is down below there's this view as. So basically if you click on that, you can go ahead and select how you want the storyboard, what iPhone app you want to use. So if I go ahead and I think I've selected on iPhone SE, it changes the look. I've selected on what was that looked like a 4. I select on the next one. It'll go ahead, I think that's an iPhone 8. So I want to go ahead and select an iPhone 11. So I will go ahead and select that, and then that's the view that we're going to be looking at. The other thing, the iPhone 11, looks like it takes up a little more of the screen. We can't see the full simulator or screen on our app, so I'm just going to go ahead and decrease the size of it to a 75. That way I can see the full interface builder on my screen at one time. So the other thing that you can go ahead and do is you can adjust the simulator that you're going to be using when the app actually runs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and select an iPhone 11 so it matches my screen that I'm designing on. If you want to, you can switch to different simulators to see what your app would look like using the various iPhones that are available. And as they come out with new iPhones, Xcode versions and iOS versions, the list of simulators does change based on how old the previous iPhones are. So once they come out with Xcode 12, there may be a different list of iOS simulators that you can use, but you can go back in and add additional simulators if you want to. So let's go ahead and get started with the app. So the first thing they want us to do is they want us to go ahead and add a button. So in order to do that, we need to go ahead and select our object library. So I will just go ahead and click on the plus command. And what there is there's a list of objects. If you cannot see the object in the list, you can just go ahead and type in the object's name and it'll bring it up. We want to go ahead and add a button, which was on the top there. So I will just go ahead, left click it, and then drag it onto my simulator. The pretty cool thing about this is that it has various lines. So they kind of guide you where you're at in the screen. So if you want to plop the button basically in the middle of the screen, those guidelines come up. So I will just go ahead and drop the button in. And then now, one thing I forgot to mention, that first I am going to go ahead and select my view underneath my view controller. And if you go ahead and click on the attributes inspector, this changes based on the type of control that you've selected. I've selected a view or type of object. I've selected a view object, so my attributes look different than if I go ahead and select a button object. So you can see the full list of button properties that you can go ahead and change, and you can actually go ahead and change those in code if you want to, instead of setting them within the attributes inspector. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and create an IB action that between our viewcontroller.swift file and our storyboard. And in order to go ahead and do that, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and open up an assistant editor. So in order to do that, we can just click on the button up above, the adjust editor options, and what I want to do is I want to specify an assistant. So I will go ahead and click on that, and basically what happens is since I had selected this view controller scene in my main storyboard, the code associated that manages that view controller, the .swift file, gets brought up. And basically this is where, when you add that IB action, is where you get access to the button in your actual Swift code. So once you have access to the button, you can write code that will occur when the button, in our case, gets pressed. So the one thing I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and drag my button up into the upper left-hand corner so you can see the guidelines, and I will just drop it in there. And then what we need to do is we need to go ahead and actually create an IB action. So in order to do that, what I need to do is there's one of two ways you can select an object when it is in your view. You can either select it actually on the view controller itself, or you can go ahead and select it in the document outline. When you have a lot of controllers or objects in your on your view, it's easier to select the right one by actually selecting it in the document outline. So I've selected it, then I will go ahead and press on the control key and hold down my mouse and drag, and what I get is a blue line. And basically this is how I would go ahead and insert an action, an outlet, or an outlet collection. And if I drag it below the viewDidLoad method, what Swift will do, our interface builder will do is, since this is the button, it will default to an action. So I will just go ahead and delete it. The connection is in action. So we've gone ahead, and I want to go ahead and name it. So I will just go ahead and name it button pressed. And I will call it a UI button, and we will go ahead and click on connect. So let me just go ahead and add a little space there. I will go ahead and close the code window, and I will open up the code window in my navigation window. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and actually build and run the app. So let's go ahead and click on the run button to do that. So I will go ahead, click on the run button. When you first run the simulator, it may take a while for the simulator to come up. So we will go ahead and wait for the simulator to actually come up. So it's attaching, it looks like it's come up, and eventually we should see our screen. Okay, we see our screen with our button. If we press on the button, nothing is currently happening. So one way that there's a couple of ways that you can make sure that when your IB action that you've created is working. So we're going to walk through that right now. So in order to get rid of the simulator, I'm just going to open up Xcode, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on the stop button, and that'll stop our simulator. So there's a couple of ways that you can make sure that you've actually, when the button is pressed, that you've actually dropped down into that function. One of the ways you can do that is by adding a breakpoint. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a breakpoint at line 19, and what should happen when I press the button pressed, our app should actually drop into our code window. So let's go ahead and see if that actually happens. That way we actually know that it is in that function itself. So I'll click on button, and it has dropped into that line. So we know that we've actually dropped into that function when the button is pressed. The other way you can do it is, let me just go ahead and select my breakpoint. I'll right click on it, and I will delete breakpoint, and I will go back to my file menu. And the other way you can do is you can actually go ahead and add in a print statement. So let me just go ahead and stop this so we get out of debug mode. And what I want to do is I just want to print a message. We're just going to go ahead and print button pressed. So now when this function is, we press on the button and this function is executed, we should see that message in our console. So let's go ahead and rerun. When you build and run, what happens is it'll actually save any changes that you've just made. So I will just click on the build and run button, and we will see what happens when we press on our button. So if I'll press on it 3 times. So if I go ahead back into my code window, we see the message button pressed 3 times. So we know that that function is actually working. So what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to go ahead and complete this application. The first thing we want to do is that when the button is pressed, we want to go ahead and actually change the background color. So we will be talking to you later.